One of the most fun ways I find to use my failed watercolor paintings or experiments or things that I've just been doing where I don't want to keep them, they're not frameable or sellable, is I just have a bin that I throw these all in and have a big stack of them. And then what I do is I go through and I just cut them all up. I do strips, I do larger pieces, I do thinner pieces, just so I have a variety of sizes. Now I have like 8 or 10 of these plastic containers that I throw them all in. I try to sort them by color. It doesn't always happen because sometimes there are multiple colors on different paintings, so I do the best I can to sort of sort them by color. And then what I do when I'm ready to work in my little, what I call my collage swatch book, is I will pull out some pieces that may be related, maybe not. Sometimes I just kind of blindly pull some stuff out and try to make them work. A lot of times I will pull multiple pieces that came from the same painting, just so I have a little bit of continuity in the collages. And again, you'll see there's big pieces, little pieces, just a variety of things. Some of the past journals I've done, and these are fluid watercolor paper field watercolor journals, and they're only 6 by 6, so they're small. So you can actually do a lot of these in an hour or even a half an hour. You can probably get 5 or 6 pages done. And once you get going, it's kind of fun to keep going. But you'll see, having a nice wire bind also helps them lay flat. And I basically just go through and create these little, what I call color swatch collages, because they're collaged on like you would do collages, although they're a little bit, they're organized in more of a graphical pattern and there's not generally overlap. They're more based on kind of a grid type system. But I'm just playing with different pieces from different paintings. Sometimes they work. Sometimes I add some other collage pieces in from other papers that I have. Here's another book. This one's almost finished, and you see how fat they get, especially when you do both sides. It doesn't actually even close, but that's okay. It's fun to do. Sometimes I will do all one color and then add maybe a section that's sort of a pop of color. But it's just a good way, I found, to use up my scraps without throwing them away and end up with something that's kind of a neat little reference, either for future paintings, abstract paintings. Maybe I want to try a different color scheme. I'll look through here and find a page. I do like the colors together. So it's all just more of a fun experiment and a way to use up some of your old papers. Okay, so the other thing you will need, so here's my little booklet. We're going to do a page here. I've already done the first page, so we're going to go to the second page. I like to use these silicone color scrapers because the glue, once you get it on here, comes off really easy. I have a little brayer that I use a piece of palette paper and roller down to make sure that stuff sticks. Obviously a scissor. If you're a super detailed person and want to line everything up perfectly, you could actually draw out a grid on here and use an X-Acto knife and a ruler and cut all your pieces to fit. I'm not that particular about making sure everything lines up perfectly. And then I'm using the Liquitex glazing medium as a way to sort of glue this all on here and seal it. You could certainly use matte medium or gloss medium of your choice. You could even use a glue stick and put it down and then put a coat of some sort of medium over it if you really want to seal it in. Because these are mostly watercolors, so if they would get wet, they would run. All right, so the way I start is I generally start with the biggest piece or a big piece. And I have to decide like what piece I want to start with. I kind of like these colors, so I think I'm going to start with this. And I generally put these in a corner and leave myself a little bit of a margin. So I'm just going to put a little bit of medium on my palette paper over here. And I just sort of pick it up and just put it on with my color shaper. You could also do the back side, you know, if you have problems with stuff sticking. I noticed that with the glazing medium, it does take a little bit longer sometimes for it to kind of stick down. So putting it on both sides seems to work a little bit better. And again, you know, you could put a piece of paper over it if you want. I don't have much glue on here yet, so I'm not worried about kind of getting stuff on here. So that would be the first piece. And then it would be, again, finding next pieces that work. I could go with another one of the same painting pieces and put in here. Kind of like the orange parts together. And I could either cut this off so it lines up, or I could just let this run long. I think I'll just let it run long. Because I don't necessarily want everything to line up perfectly. I want to have kind of a staggered grid. And again, I'm just going to put that on and glue it down. I also try to make sure that I have some plain pieces as well as some textured pieces, just for variety. Maybe this big piece down here might be kind of interesting. And that needs to get cut off about here. So again, here I'm not ensuring that it's perfectly square. If that's, you know, something you want to do, or you have a little cutter, you can use that to, you know, make sure that things are square. You could even lay this whole thing out, kind of pre-cut all the pieces and lay everything out before you glue them on. Again, I like to do these fairly quick so I don't overthink it. So it's basically like putting together a puzzle. And then what I do is just basically go over the whole thing to set the watercolor in. Now you want to be a little bit careful here when you're doing this, that you're not scrubbing too much, because this medium can actually activate the watercolor and it can start smearing it around. So you want to do it kind of gently once and let it dry a little bit. And if you need to put on another coat, you can. And I just roller this down just to make sure that everything sticks really well. And it's nice and flat. And that's all you have to do. Another thing you can do with failed watercolor paintings or paintings that you don't want to keep is repurpose them for acrylic painting or mixed media. I have this little 8x8 landscape that I was experimenting with granulation medium and some other things. So what I do is I just get some regular painter's tape or masking tape and tape it down. Give myself a little bit of an edge on all four sides. You don't have to tape it down. It's just easier to keep it flat and let it dry flat if you've got it taped down, you know, just kind of like you would do with watercolor paper, right? Stretch and tape it down. I just find having it taped down is a little bit easier, one, to get the gesso on, and two, I can just leave it dry and it should dry fairly flat. Now this one I didn't put an edge on when I didn't tape it off when I did the watercolor, so I don't have an edge, so I'm going to end up with a little bit of a watercolor edge, but that's okay because you can either trim that off if it you know, something you want to frame anyway. I use just white gesso. You obviously could use black, any brand, it doesn't really matter. I just buy the big tubs of it because I use a bunch of it. This does have water in it, or it will sort of reactivate the watercolor. So if you're concerned about that, you can also use a final fix or something to spray on there just to set the watercolor so that it doesn't activate when you put the gesso on. It could be a varnish as well. I use this for pastel and my charcoal stuff, so it's just something I have on hand. And then I just got a cheap brush at Michael's. I think this is the Artist Loft brushes. They're the you know, the cheaper brushes, and they're pretty good. They have, you know, synthetic bristles, but they take quite a bit of sort of beating up, so they're good brushes to spread the gesso with. And all you have to do is just like you're going to prime a canvas, like if you stretched and did a canvas. So I just, you know, grab a bunch of it and just put it right on there. Now this paper is, I believe this is the hot press watercolor paper, so it's a little bit smoother. Obviously, if you paint on cold press paper or rough paper, it'll have a bit more of a texture. So putting the gesso on might be a little bit more problematic in like getting texture and lines in it. And you know, I'll go both ways. I'll put it on one way and come back and do it the other way. And you'll see here, you know, it's really heavy sort of color pigment from the watercolor there. But again, you know, if you're doing mixed media over this with acrylic or inks or other things, you know, those little colors that are there are not even going to show. So I just do a couple good passes just to make sure that it's coated well, and then let it dry. And if it seems like it's, you know, needs another coat, then I will add another coat. All right, so a third way that I reuse watercolor paintings is to put pastel over them. Most watercolor paper, especially the cold press paper or the rough paper, has a textured surface to it, which makes it really good for soft pastels as well. So this, I had painted this seascape with, you know, some waves and stuff, and I didn't like it as a watercolor so much. So I basically came back and just added in some soft pastel, and you can, you know, leave it textury, you can blend it in. It just gave me a way to repurpose this painting and practice, you know, additional work with my pastel work. You know, if you don't like it, you can still throw it away. I've actually had two seascapes that I've done this with that I just loved when they were finished, and actually are framed. So you just never know. Sometimes you can save a watercolor painting by, you know, enhancing it with pastels or acrylic paint or some other things. So don't be afraid to experiment. You know, if you're just a watercolor artist and you don't have these other things to experiment with, then that's fine. You know, you can always flip it over and, you know, try using the other side as well. But I would encourage you to get a scrapbook, try the color swatch collage, or, you know, just throwing some gesso on it and doing some acrylic painting and just reusing. We all know that, you know, art materials are expensive, so I try to at least get some additional practice out of, you know, watercolor paintings that I don't want to keep as watercolor paintings.